Are you sick of GX or V or VMAX Pokemon? Well, I mean, lots of people are. Let's test out Decidueye from Darkness Ablaze, see how we can stop them attacking. Welcome back, everyone, to more from the Sableyes. I'm Mitch, and today I'm going to be taking a look at Decidueye, which is coming out in the new Darkness Ablaze set. This deck is pretty cool. It's not necessarily as strong as some of the other decks that we've been testing so far, but it does have a pretty neat mechanic. Decidueye's ability means it can't be damaged by Pokemon V, VMAX, or GX, so very, very strong. We'll take a look at the list and see exactly how it's supposed to work. So here is our Decidueye list. This is obviously a first draft of this deck, and there's definitely some changes to be made, but it is gonna generally get the job. It's generally gonna get the job done. I mean, it's a pretty solid list of 60 cards here. There's a lot of things to talk about, so let's jump straight in. The first one, obviously, is the name card of the deck. That is Decidueye with Forest Camouflage. It means that this Decidueye cannot be damaged by any Pokemon V or GX, and that includes VMAX. So this Decidueye can effectively wall an entire deck if it is not prepared for it. So we need to make sure that we are running cards that aren't just VMAX or GX Pokemon in the upcoming format, because otherwise Decidueye can just come through and win the game. Split Arrow is a pretty decent attack as well. Does 90 damage for a grass and a colorless, and then does 20 damage to 2 of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So if you're able to get that Forest Camouflage ability locking your opponent's active out of attacking, then eventually you're going to win the game by doing enough damage. 90 and then 20-20 snipe is pretty solid. It's obviously not like game-breakingly good, but combined with the fact that your opponent can't attack, that's a big, big deal. Now we've got a 4-2-4 line of Decidueye in this list. We've got 4 copies of the basic Rowlet, which is obviously required to get into your 4 Decidueye, but it can also do some really cool things as well. It's got the ability Sky Circus, which means that when you play a Bird Keeper supporter from your hand during your turn, you can ignore all energy cost from this attack. So Wind Pebbles for 3 colorless does 60 to 1 of your opponent's Pokemon without any energy, free 60 damage if you play this supporter Bird Keeper, which is going to switch your active Pokemon and draw you 3 cards. So it's kind of like a welder with a switch instead of attaching energy. So we can play this Bird Keeper and then attack with Wind Pebbles on Rowlet. It means we get ourselves access to some early damage if we need it. Worst case scenario, we can then evolve into Decidueye. Dartrix also has an attack for 1 energy, which does 40, which doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but when you think about it, it's going to go 40 plus 90, so 130. Once you've attacked with Decidueye, that could potentially set up some knockouts on some basic Pokemon, because 130 tends to be the highest HP cap that they reach. So it's a really interesting kind of combination of cards here. All 3 of these Pokemon can potentially attack. Obviously, Decidueye is the main one that you want to get into play, but there are options throughout this line, which is obviously important. Now, it's not going to work all the time. We're going to need some extra damage somewhere else. We're going to use 1 copy of Galarian Zigzagoon in order to do that. Headbutt Tantrum is a very, very good ability. Placing 10 damage onto any Pokemon on the field can set up those knockouts that we were talking about before. Split Arrow can potentially take multiple prizes in a turn, so you need to be careful of that. And since we've got 4 copies of Scoop Up Net in this list, Zigzagoon can potentially get that extra damage tick off 5 times. It's not likely, but it is possible. The rest of the Pokemon are just those consistency support ones. We've got 4 copies of Jirachi. This is the best card that we want to start with, so we give ourselves the highest odds. There's 4 of them here. Obviously, Stellar Wish is a very good ability. Being able to look at the top 5 cards of your deck and find a trainer there gives your deck a ton more consistency, and since we're playing 4 copies of Rare Candy, we really need that. It's not necessarily super consistent when we're always looking for an item to get into our main Pokemon, but with Jirachi, it makes it just that little bit more possible. And we also have 1 copy of the new Crobat V, which is obviously very, very good at drawing cards. Night Asset can draw up to 6, so you draw your hand until you have 6 cards in hand. Draw into your hand, add cards to your hand. Once during your turn when you play this Pokemon, you can draw cards until you have 6 cards in hand. That's the better way to explain it. So Crobat, very, 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 very strong. Definitely look at picking up one of these as soon as Darkness Ablaze comes out on PTCGO. Obviously, we're in Tabletop Sim, so we can have them for free. The rest of the deck is built around getting this Decidueye out as soon as possible. Wow. Really struggling today. We've got 4 copies of Professor's Research. Draw 7 is obviously very, very good. We are looking for those rare candy pieces, so we want to be able to get into them as quickly as possible, but it's not always the best supporter to play in this style of deck, because you might have a rare candy in hand and only a Professor's Research. You're looking for one Decidueye. You don't want to get rid of that rare candy, right? You don't want to get rid of it. So instead of playing Professor's Research, you might consider playing 3 copies of Marnie. That will obviously shuffle your hand to the bottom of the deck, so to get rid of the piece that you have, whether it is a rare candy or a Decidueye or even a Pokemon Communication, it'll shuffle it to the bottom of the deck, but at least it'll still be there. The best card that you can play to try and find all of the pieces is Rosa. If one of your Pokemon has been knocked out, and you're going to have Pokemon knocked out in this deck, but when one of them gets knocked out, you can search for a Pokemon, a Trainer, and an Energy, which will find all of these pieces. You get Decidueye, rare candy, and a Grass Energy to build up your Decidueye ready to start attacking. So Rosa is probably the best supporter for finding Decidueyes, but these supporters here, Research and Marnie, are still by far the best consistency supporters in the game. Now, I obviously mentioned Bird Keeper before, has some nice synergy with Rowlet, lets you be a little bit more maneuverable, means we need to spend less space in our deck on switch cards, and we get ourselves a little bit more consistency because we're drawing 3. Bird Keeper obviously then allows us to use Wind Pebbles from Rowlet, so a really, really cool card. Whether it's useful or not in this deck, I'm not entirely sure. Haven't had too much I haven't had enough time to test really to see whether it's that great, but it does give you the option, so we may as well play with it. And we also have 2 copies of Boss's Orders in this list as well to gust out Pokemon that we want to either take knockouts on, if we can, or that we want to stall into the active. So with our Decidueyes doing Split Arrow every single turn, if our opponent has something like a non-GX, non-V attacker, we want to take a knockout on that, or we want to bring forward something that is going to get locked into the active. So if we could do that, that would be excellent. We've obviously got a lot of Pokemon search in this list as well. We need to find basics and Decidueyes as quickly as possible. So Quick Ball, 4 copies of that, 4 copies of Quick Ball in every deck you play. It's by far the best Pokemon search in the game. Discard 1, find a basic. That can be a Rowlet for you. It could even be a Jirachi or maybe Crobat to draw some extra cards. Zigzagoon can also be found. And then we have 3 copies of Pokemon Communication. It's a little bit lower because we don't necessarily need them, but they're obviously the only way that we can use items to search out Decidueye, which we obviously need very quickly. But we also have 2 copies of Turffield Stadium, which can also help us find our Decidueyes. So if we have Turffield down, we can find a Dartrix, we can find a Decidueye, whatever it is that we want to find, we can get it with Turffield Stadium. It means we don't necessarily need to rely on Pokecom, which can be dead if you don't have a Pokemon in your hand. So we need to be careful with that, but it is still obviously a very powerful option. We mentioned the rare candy. For rare candy in the deck, definitely required because it allows us to go straight from our Rowlet into our Decidueye. Scoop Up Net, I've already talked about. Pretty much every Pokemon in this list can be picked up by Scoop Up Net because only V and GX Pokemon can't be picked up, so Crobat is the only Pokemon that we're not going to be able to reuse. We have 2 copies of Switch. It's a little bit low, but we do have access to Bird Keeper and Scoop Up Net, so it's not the end of the world. And once we have a Decidueye in the active attacking, we're probably going to be relatively happy with that anyway. So we don't really need to move out of the active once we've got our attackers there. We can just keep attacking with Split Arrow until either the Decidueye gets knocked out or we win the game. So we've got that option, and we also have 1 copy of Ordinary Rod as well. It allows us to recycle our Decidueyes and our Rowlets, so if we do have 1 or 2 of them knocked out, we can always bring them back. Now, when it comes to our energy, we have 6 Grass Energy down the bottom here. That's obviously one of the required attachments from Decidueye. We need a Grass with Split Arrow. We can also search it out with Rosa because we can find a basic energy card with her. But we also have 1 colorless energy on this attack cost, so we can play another energy type. We're playing Capture Energy in this one because we are relying on finding those basics as quickly as possible. So if you attach a Capture Energy to a Rowlet, that'll help you find either another Rowlet, you can find a Jirachi, or if you're desperate to just not lose, we can find Zigzagoon or Crobat, but you probably want to have them in hand. Capture Energy almost definitely being used for these Rowlets up here. So this deck obviously is a very interesting one. It's not quite as aggressive as some of the other decks that we've shown so far, and it does have that little caveat of not really being able to deal with basic attackers that are non-V or non-GX, but it is still definitely an archetype worth persisting with. Have a try, see how you go, and we'll definitely feature this one on PTCGO once Darkness Ablaze drops in a couple of days. So that's the list that we've been testing out. Obviously, it is a first draft, so don't feel like you have to adhere to every single card when you're doing your testing of Darkness Ablaze stuff. We've obviously got lots of time before the set releases, so plenty of opportunities to mix and match to find the perfect list for Decidueye. Hopefully you've enjoyed this one. If you have, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. There's a button up above the Sableye head to do that. On the left-hand side, there are some videos that YouTube thinks you'll like, and on the right, a playlist for our pre-release Darkness Ablaze testing. Thank you, everyone, for coming along, and we'll see you next time for more from the Sableyes.